If you've been wanting to try a foil nail dip, then this video is going to be for you. What's up, nail crew? It's Nicole, your fellow nail obsessed DIYer. Today we are going back to some basics, and I want to talk about how you can do a foil nail dip and get a really nice coverage on your nails. The first thing I like to do is pour the foil dip into either a dip cup like I'm using, or if you don't have one of those, you can also use a cupcake liner, either a mini one or a regular size one. The key to dipping your foils is to laying your nail flat in it. Since the foils kind of fly everywhere when you dip them, you don't want to pour the foils over or you're not going to pick many up. The key to dipping foils is to laying your nails flat. That is the first key. And like I always do, I try to make my liquids as thin as possible. This way the foils don't get super thick. Since foils lay really flat, you don't want to apply your liquids thick. You want to keep them nice and thin so that then your foils can stay thin too. This one that I'm using is called Pink Wine Makes Me Slutty. And if you've seen New Girl, you know exactly what that's from. When Jess said that, I am absolutely obsessed. When I saw this powder, it's like a milky pink with these gold foils. I mean, pink and gold, like two of my favorite colors to wear on my nails, pink, gold, and black. Like those are basically my three favorite colors to wear on my nails. So I have been loving like the milky look of nails. So anything that is a milky look plus with foils, I am in absolute heaven. I knew that I was going to do this on all 5 nails. There's just no way that I could wear anything else with this gorgeous dip. This color absolutely had to have its own Manny. One of the other keys to dipping foils is to shake up the powder. And this is what I do for glitters, for flakes, for foils. Shaking up the powder really gently allows all the big pieces to come up to the top so that when you lay your nail into it, you get a lot more coverage and don't have to place as many foils. When I'm dipping the first layer, I don't try as hard to get as many foils. I try to pick up some, but it's not super important. Then once that first layer is fully dry, I take a stiff nail brush to go brush off any excess powder and any excess foils just to keep my nails as nice and thin as possible. Then on my second layer is where I'm really going to try to make sure that I pick up all those foils. So you can see on my thumb that luckily I did get a bunch of foils picked up. Then I won't have to place as many individually. Now, I could have just stopped and not placed any foils. And some people don't care if a lot of foils are placed. I like to do a little bit of both. So I try to get as many foils as I possibly can on the second dip. And then I go back through and hand place any that I feel like the areas are just a little too sparse. Okay, this is something that I was watching this video yelling at myself for doing. Typically, I put a piece of tape on the other hand. So on my left hand, I would have a piece of tape on either my pointer finger or my middle finger to press down the foils, and I forgot to put one on. I can't do any more manis when I keep touching the dip powder. My hands get itchy if I touch dip powder too much. That started back in the fall. I was just touching my nails way too much without gloves on, doing swatches without gloves. So now I'm really careful. I just basically gave myself contact dermatitis from touching everything too much. Now, as long as I don't touch it, I don't get itchy. So I was kicking myself, yelling at myself, come on, Nicole, you know better than this. So anyways, you can see my nails starting to really, you can see my mani starting to really come together and how gorgeous all those foils look with this beautiful milky pink. And of course, being typical me, I spilled a little bit of the powder. I mean, it wouldn't be a mani if I didn't at least mess something up. But now that I have these dip cups, I've noticed that I don't spill nearly as much because I can bump them and they just slightly move, versus when I was using cupcake liners all the time, because they're so light, they would just fly all over the place. I mean, I've left some of them in my videos, but you saw dip powders just basically flying all over in some of my other videos. So I took advantage of what I spilled and used those foils to place on my nail, because I thought, okay, I'm not going to try to pick through the dip that's sitting there in the dip cup. I might as well just use all these foils, as many as possible of the foils that I spilled, to fill in some of the little gaps. For me, when the foils are smaller, I don't like to see a lot of gaps. Since they're small foils, it just feels like they aren't, I don't know, it just feels like, to me, it doesn't look right on my nails. Some people really like the look of just a little bit of foils, but I really love going through and placing them. It's just something extra you can do do that just, adds a little bit more to your mani if that's the look that you're going for. And if you like that very subtle foil look, then you don't have to place any of those foils. I'm taking my Stabby stick, this little plastic stick that I have that I go around my cuticles with, and placing the foils with that. So I dab a little dip base on my nails where I feel like the foils are sparse. And then I just take the Stabby stick, put the little pointy end on the dip on my nail, and then use it to pick up some of the foils. Normally I like to use either a wax tool or some kind of Orangewood stick, but they were both out of reach, which I feel like often happens to me. And I say that in a lot of videos because I end up forgetting to pull something like that out. And I'm just like, it's too late now. I'm not even going to bother. Typically have to throw out the Stabby stick because it feels like a lot of dip base gets stuck to it. So it doesn't go around your cuticles as well. But luckily they come in a really big pack. So it's not that big of a deal. I forget. I think the pack is like 50 or 100. I can't remember off the top of my head. Once I finish placing all the foils, then I let that layer really dry. So I obviously didn't show this in the video, but I let that layer dry for a few minutes before I go and I brush off the excess powder. I want to make sure that I'm not going to accidentally brush off too many of the beautiful foils. Then I add my last layer of clear dip powder. And when you're using dip liquids and covering your foils with clear dip powder, you want to make sure that last layer is really, really dry. And actually every layer is really dry before you go to brush it off. If your dip layer isn't dry enough before you try to brush off any excess, your foils can sometimes bleed. These foils aren't ones that bleed, but a lot of the colored ones definitely do. So you want to make sure that layer is dry before you put any dip base over it. And you'll know when you're brushing off any excess, if it starts to stick to your brush, you know, okay, your layer is not dry enough. So it is not time to go through and apply that next layer of dip base over it. Once I applied the clear dip powder as my last layer, I brushed off the excess clear, then I activated and I waited till my nails hardened, and I just did a very minimal amount of buffing and shaping and filing. I really didn't have to do much since this powder laid so beautifully even with the foils. I love when that happens, then I don't have to buff and shape much. I do my manis late at night after my kids go to bed, so I'm always trying to figure out different ways to help my nails go faster because I don't want to be doing my nails for like 4 hours. Now I will say typically I take a minimum of 2, 1.5 if I do one color on all 10 nails, like maybe 2 hours if I do a couple colors, but I try to stay out of the 3 to 4 hour range just because I don't want to stay up until 11, 12 o'clock at night, right? Like nobody wants to. I knew I was going to end up wearing this mani for a while, so I decided to finish with a layer of gel base and gel top. Whenever I'm using gels to finish my mani, I make sure that I wipe off really well with isopropyl alcohol on a lint-free wipe, then do my gel base, fully cure that, gel top coat, and fully cure that. If you're still struggling with foils and you want to know how to dip foils that are colored and not get them to bleed, then check out this next video. Thanks so much for joining me today, nail crew.